Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio. I'm joined here by Colin Beaney, the Global Industry Director for Energy and Utilities at IFS. Colin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Rob.
So let's start by talking about smart meters. So the UK government have said that every household and every small business has got to have a smart meter installed by 2020. Is that even possible? And what do you see as the blockages?
It's a very good question, Rob. I think part of the challenge is, it's a massive challenge for everybody involved in the program. I think it didn't start particularly well. There was a little bit of a lag before people got going. But you've got to have a little bit of sympathy for the government. They announced these huge infrastructure type projects, and unfortunately what they tend to do is they tend to then put sort of conditions onto the suppliers into this piece of work. For example, one of the early mandates was that all of the suppliers of smart meters would also provide an in-house display. And of course, time has moved on from that.
Yeah.
And consumers don't want necessarily another device installed into their house. There's obviously been challenges with the specification of the meters as well, the sort of SMETS 1, SMETS 2 issue. But I think the program's ramping up now as it should. And I think one of the challenges that there still is to communicate to consumers what the benefits are going to be with having smart meters installed into your devices. Both the sort of short-term benefits of being able to understand what your usage is, what your bills are likely to be, as well as longer-term benefits of being able to possibly interact more closely with the providers, the grid providers, and sort of say, do you know what, I won't charge my vehicle at that point in time because you're going to give me a little bit of a discount on my bill, allowing me to charge my vehicle at another time. But I think what sort of doesn't help is that the press in the UK are now sort of reporting on the odd issue that's found during smart meter installation. Companies come along, they find a problem, they tell the customer, the householder, we're not able to fit your smart meter today. We know that you've stayed at home for us to come along and do the work, and we're not able to do it because there's a problem on the fuse board, and we've got to get somebody else involved. And I think consumers think, well, hold on a second, I didn't realise it was that complex. And I've moved into a new property. It's 2 years old, but my energy provider still doesn't actually recognise my address. I called them up in the beginning and said, look, I want to be considered as part of this smart meter program. They said, well, unfortunately, we're not installing them in your area. And then you think, well, why didn't they put one in the beginning? It's only a 2-year-old property. So there's a lot of challenges.
And you mentioned about being a consumer yourself. I'll presume you're a hyper consumer when it comes to energy, and you're very aware of how to be a consumer in the energy space.
Try to be, yeah.
How aware do you think the general population are, though? And do people even care about their energy supplier?
No. I don't. I think they don't. They don't care enough, which is a real challenge. You would imagine that since it's a considerable expense that you're paying out every month, that people would be a little bit more conscious of switching. But as we know, the number of people that are actively switching is low. There's a lot of people on standard variable tariffs, and the regulator is still trying to demand and dictate that energy companies take people off of those tariffs because they are the least favourable to the consumers. But I think in general, Rob, you're absolutely right. Most householders are not as in tune as they need to be. But of course, that's likely to change as the younger generation become a lot more connected with all sorts of things.
And presumably, if we start to become producers of energy ourselves, that will by necessity change our level of engagement with utilities and with energy in general?
Absolutely, and I think there are other challenges there, because consumers may actually start to lead the development of microgrids and peer-to-peer trading and those sort of things, and the energy providers might not actually be geared up for that. So if I start to, through my solar panels or my sort of small little wind turbine, if I start to generate myself, and storage is going to improve, of course, it's really exciting times.
So let's look at the challenges that utilities have got in implementing. What do you see as the ways that utilities can mitigate the risks that are in front of them when it comes to implementation?
Yeah, I think there's simply obvious challenges around things like inventory. I heard recently about a situation where there's quite a number of meters sort of missing from an inventory of a large organisation. They haven't been accounted for. They're not sure. They've probably been installed, but haven't yet been able to tie that inventory back to the issue of the meter out to the contractor or the worker, the engineer. I think the engagement with consumers has got to be very clear. It's got to be very obvious in how you can interact with consumers, keeping them informed, keeping them on board. If a consumer rings up and looks for a meter installation and you're not able to do it then let's not forget about those consumers. Let's make sure they're on a list to be contacted, so that when you are able to install in that area, you can. Things like appointment booking are going to be absolutely critical. People expect engineers to turn up when they're expected to, carry out the work, have all of the necessary paperwork, procedures, documentation, parts that they need, and the necessary skills. We've been doing some work with a company up in Scotland who are doing work very closely with Scottish Power, and they've retrained their workforce so that the scope of work that they're able to do is wider than a normal meter install. So instead of having to get some other organisation back to carry out a little bit of a repair work on the feed, this company are able to do it themselves. So that's a real positive for the consumers.
So let's just finish by talking about enterprise systems. So you spent the last 20 years implementing enterprise systems, and I read in your blog recently that you said that the best way for utilities to implement systems is at pace. That seems counterintuitive to me. Explain to me briefly what you mean by that.
It's a good point, and I think what I'm trying to get across there is that not all implementations can be achieved at pace or in a sort of rapid way. But if you're looking for some lean implementation, because maybe you're a new entrant into the smart meter program, and all that you need to do is firstly get a lean finance solution implemented, and then a procurement system so that you can actually start to buy the meters, then there's no need for that type of implementation to take months. That can be done in a matter of weeks. And then from that you can grow the system to include appointment booking, scheduling, work management, mobile working, subcontract services. Everything should be able to evolve from over time. A lot of enterprise products, unfortunately, are quite tightly nailed down at the beginning of the implementation. IFS is able to be adjusted. Your business model might change over time, and the system has to be able to flex and adjust as you go there.
And have you got a real-life example of a utility that's kind of had to flex and grow, and the system has had to do that alongside?
Absolutely. We signed a project last year in Africa, World Bank finance. This was for a government a government state electricity company that were looking to, as part of their program, to bring electricity to the wider populace. They were looking to implement a business application. And you know, from a standing start, we were able to get something up and running within a matter of 6 to 8 months. Finance application, payroll. And then from that, they've now moved into more of a consumer engagement, billing, CRM type capability. So, you know, and they are changing the mix of how they're going to purchase power. A lot of independent power producers are going to go into that region, and they're going to be able to buy from them. So whereas initially the company were originally thinking that they were going to source electricity from the rest of the state organisation, new producers have come in.
Great.
And further, just very briefly, another example in the UK in the water industry is, of course, the market has recently been opened up to competition. Firstly, in non-domestic, and that means companies that previously were serving the whole market have now had to create separate companies, one for the non-domestic market, one for the domestic market, because that's what the regulator has demanded. So it's a complete separation of business into an existing company. And of course, they want to be able to do that quickly, seamlessly, and with minimal disruption to business.
So that flexibility is key.
Absolutely.
Well, I think on that note, we'll end there. Colin, Beaney, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Rob.
And you can watch more videos on the Engerati YouTube channel.